All right, let's talk about one of the greatest weapons ever built. A machine that was, by pretty much every measure, the most advanced of its time. But what we're really going to unpack here is a kind of blueprint, a story that shows how the obsessive hunt for perfection can lead to absolute catastrophic failure. And its story is one of the most important warnings in the history of engineering.
Now get this, that's not some line from German propaganda. That is a direct quote from the guys whose job it was to destroy it, British tank commanders. They were the ones facing Germany's Panther tank, and frankly, they were terrified. Because on paper and in a one-on-one fight, there was no question. The Panther was king.
And right there, that's the paradox that makes this whole story so fascinating. It's this incredible case study in how amazing battlefield power can be totally wiped out by strategic reality. It's about the huge difference between being the best and being effective. And that's a lesson that, is probably more relevant for us today than it ever was back then.
Okay, so to really get why it failed, we first have to appreciate the myth, right? You got to understand why everyone thought this thing was so incredible. The Panther wasn't just another upgrade. It was born from a moment of pure shock when the German army ran into the Soviet T-34 for the first time. It scared them so bad, they went back to the drawing board to create something truly invincible, a super weapon.
I mean, just look at these numbers. They create a complete tactical nightmare for anyone on the receiving end. That gun, it fired a shell so fast, combined with armor that was super thick and sloped, it meant a Panther could kill an American Sherman tank from over a mile away. The Sherman couldn't even get close enough to return fire. The Panther basically created its own personal zone of invincibility.
But, as we all know, what looks good on paper doesn't always work in reality. The Panther's big debut was set for the Battle of Kursk, the single largest tank battle in all of human history. This was supposed to be its moment of glory. Instead, it revealed a devastating fatal flaw, one that was totally hidden in the specs.
So this was the day, July 5th, 1943. Germany unleashes its brand new superweapon. You've got 184 Panthers, shiny and fresh from the factory, ready to lead the charge. The entire plan was to use them to smash through the Soviet lines and change the whole course of the war. Seriously, the hopes of the entire offensive were riding on this machine.
And this one number tells you everything. 40. That's how many Panthers were still working after just 2 days of fighting. 2 days! Nearly 3/4 of them were out of action. But here's the kicker. Most of them weren't even hit by the enemy. They just broke down. The Panther's greatest enemy, it turns out, was itself.
And if you look at the official German reports from a couple weeks later, the disaster is right there in black and white. Only 16% were still running. The vast majority were either knocked out or, more importantly, just sitting there waiting for repairs. Their final drives were failing, transmissions were locking up, the engines were literally catching on fire. All that brilliant, sophisticated engineering was just too delicate for the real world.
So while the Germans were chasing perfection, the Allies were taking a completely different path. And that brings us to the American M4 Sherman, a tank that a lot of people make fun of as being inferior, but it held the real secret to victory. It was reliable, and there were just so many of them.
This chart right here tells the whole story. The Sherman was never meant to win a one-on-one duel. But look at its operational rate, almost double the Panther's. Think about that for a second. If you're a commander, for every 10 Panthers you have, maybe 4 are ready to go. For every 10 Shermans, 7 or 8. And now, look at the production numbers. It wasn't about one tank being better, it was about the relentless, overwhelming pressure of always being there.
This really wasn't just a battle between two tanks. It was a clash between two totally different ways of thinking about war in an industrial age.
And in a lot of ways, the winner was decided by those philosophies long before a single tank ever rolled off the assembly line.
The German engineering culture was all about chasing perfection. They built this complex masterpiece that was a nightmare to manufacture and even harder to keep running. The American approach? Pure pragmatism. They built a simple, reliable tool that was good enough. Something you could mass-produce by the tens of thousands and that a mechanic could fix in a muddy field with a basic toolkit. And here it is, the single fatal flaw that explains almost everything. The Panther was just too heavy. It started life as a 35-ton design, but they kept piling on more armor and a bigger gun until it weighed 45 tons. That extra weight put constant, crippling stress on a transmission, an engine, and a suspension that were never designed to handle it. It was a domino effect of failure, built in from the very beginning.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote is from a French Army report from after the war. The French operated a whole battalion of captured Panthers, and they actually used them longer than any single German unit ever did. Their conclusion was just chilling. The most critical part of the tank, the final drive, failed on average after just 150 kilometers. That's less than 100 miles. It was a catastrophic built-in weakness.
So why should you care about a failed tank from 80 years ago? Because the Panther story didn't just end there. Its magnificent failure became this incredibly powerful lesson, a blueprint that continues to shape technology, military planning, and even how businesses are run in our world right now. The U.S. military learned this lesson, and they never forgot it. You can see it in every single major American tank since World War II, from the Patton all the way to the modern M1 Abrams. Reliability and logistics are now considered just as important as firepower, because they learned the hard way that the best weapon in the world is totally useless if it can't get to the fight.
And these aren't just military ideas anymore. This is stuff that's taught in engineering schools, in business schools, in tech companies all over the world. That term, requirements creep, that's the ghost of the Panther. Its story is the cautionary tale they use to keep today's projects from collapsing under their own weight.
And that really brings the question back to us, doesn't it? In our own work, our careers, our companies, where are we chasing some flawless, perfect ideal when a good enough solution would actually get the job done and win the day? When does that pursuit of the absolute best stop us from achieving what's actually effective? That's the Panther's real legacy, and it's a question we're thinking about.